Hello, loves, and welcome to the Feminine Legacy podcast. This is your host, Jacqueline Hyacinth, and I'm thrilled today to be bringing on a sister and a special guest, Sangeet Raj, and she is a fertility specialist and a spiritual midwife deeply rooted in women's wisdom. And she's coming to share with us today. We're going to talk about all things natural fertility, IVF, and so hold on to your hearts as we venture into terrain. And yeah, just listen deeply and see what's here for you. Welcome, Sangeet.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's nice to see you, and thanks for sharing me with your audience.
Thanks for being here. So it's really beautiful to see so many women coming into women's work and coming back to the roots of natural ways. We see that the Western medical complex has been running shit for a long time. And prior to that, women were the center and still are the center, but we were the center of our birth. And it's beautiful to see that you have a calling to return those ways. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what brought you into midwifery and to the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, my story begins with me becoming a mother myself. For a long time, I didn't think that that was within my destiny.
Mhm.
Um, I, like many women in the United States, was what I now call like hyper masculine and very achievement oriented. My career was my first love. And um, I, I always thought that I would be someone's auntie or like that fun aunt. But I didn't center what I now know as the highest potential that women have, and that's becoming a mother.
Mhm. Yeah, it is the biggest
Mhm.
and most powerful pathway for sure.
It is. So when I became a mother, I had an awakening in me. And it was such a transformative experience that I couldn't, in good conscience, go back to my corporate high-powered career that I had worked my life for at that point. And I think that what made it so was that I had experienced birth trauma in a nearby hospital in at Hudson Valley Hospital.
Okay.
And um I just I was unemployed when I was pregnant. I had taken some time off and I had done all of the research. I had read all of the books. I did all the prenatal yoga. Um, because I took that attitude of like being that overachiever
hmm
into what life had handed me, which was a pregnancy at that point. So I did all of the things.
Yeah.
And so, being the good girl and doing all the things and hiring the doula and making sure that I had a team of two Black OBs and a diverse set of midwives,
Yeah.
a hospital that was an independent private hospital in Hudson Valley. Like, of course, I was going to have an orgasmic, awakened birth. But little did I know that I was up against a well-oiled machine. And so you need a damn near miracle to go to expect a that type of experience in the medical industrial complex. So after having my son and experiencing a very disempowered labor experience and walking away with the gift of birth trauma that just keeps giving,
I hear that.
then I was just like, if I went through these women out here, they don't stand a chance.
hmm
And so I dedicated my life to just everything that had to do with healing ourselves as women, as womb bearers.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, super, super powerful. So I'm curious. So as far as the birth trauma goes, I mean, to some degree, whenever we give birth in a hospital, there is some degree of that because there's so much unseen, because we're not conscious about so much of the energetics and so much of what we're allowing to happen throughout our pregnancies, like so much interference and touch and like people all in a woman's body when it's just not even necessary. I mean, the things I've learned personally post-birth, and I have a 31-year-old son, so the timeline's incredibly different. But what is happening, it's so disturbing that this has been standard norm for so long. And so, yeah, it's really powerful, even though we have to go through processes of being disempowered to come the other angle to bring the power back in. That fucking memory, that
Yeah.
remembering really, really wants to open, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went into birth work after having my son and having that experience. And then I started to see that even with the information I had gained, women were still experiencing birth traumas and in the hospitals. And then I moved to out of hospital experiences with home births, supporting home births and attending home births with other midwives who were practicing traditionally. And, being plagued by the headlines of maternal mortality and morbidity and poor infant health outcomes. And I really was at the center of that as a birth justice advocate for women of color in New York. And I started to ask myself, why is this happening?
Hmm.
Because the conversation just, there's a lot of finger pointing in the media when we see these headlines, but why is this happening? So a lot of people, I mean, the truth comes down to racism, and that's undisputed that plays a huge factor. And that is the number one factor. But we cannot control as women a provider's, you know, prejudices or racist attitudes, right? As an autonomous woman, like we learn about what we can control and what we cannot control. So we cannot control that. We can control what provider we go to, but like I said, I experienced that even at the hands of women, other women of color.
Hmm.
So I was like, well, what can we control that still contributes to these poor maternal and birth outcomes? And that's our health and preconception. So that's how I ended up doing fertility work, is that if as women we do our healing work, and that can look many different ways, but if we do our healing work before we even come into a pregnancy, before we give birth, then we have the best chances to positively affect our health and the birth outcomes of our children. So that's how I ended up in the space of conscious conception, especially helping women with infertility.
I want to lean back for a second and just deepen something because I think there's like a few pieces and I want to anchor it. So, first, I understand that racism exists in the birth world, but if women across the board are experiencing trauma, like Black women, white women, so you're saying structural racism
Yeah.
and and when we're talking about racism, so I want to be also clear for our listeners, yes, it exists. And also, are we talking about just towards people of color? Are we talking about the disdain and the misogyny towards women as a whole? Because there's trauma across the board for all women that's being held at the hands of these structures. These, I don't know if I want to call them patriarchal structures anymore. I'm kind of like fucking over it. But just the the frameworks that have been put in place that do not serve life. And
Yes.
so when you're speaking about racism, though, I just want to be clear about that because we're clear it's happening to all women. So are you
Yes.
talking about the morbidity rates specifically
Yeah.
when it comes to racism?
yeah, let's go there.
Let's go
So,
there.
yes, there's misogyny and there's the patriarchy.
Mhm.
And so all women are experiencing birth trauma from my experience in going to these hospitals
Yeah.
with women. However, when we look at maternal mortality or morbidity, which means near death experiences, and we look at the health of the children that are being born from women of color, that number, for example, you know how you asked me where I grew up
Hmm.
in the Bronx, which is one of the places I lived as a child, it's 12 times more likely if you are a Black woman that you will suffer from either mortality or maternal morbidity, near a near death
Okay.
experience in childbirth.
Got it.
So there's levels to this shit, is what I'm
Hmm.
saying.
Yeah.
So you already are at a predisposition as a woman to experience trauma and neglect in the medical industrial complex. But
Yeah.
as a woman of color, we see this at an alarming, disproportionate rate. And it goes the same for infertility.
Hmm.
Women of color are 2 times more likely than their white counterparts to experience infertility. So we have to kind of go to the next layer of, well, why is it that we're suffering these negative outcomes? It's usually because there's some kind of health condition that as we become pregnant or try to become pregnant with infertility, our bodies experience a challenge with. And
Yeah.
so why is that?
Yeah.
And it's usually there's things that are being passed down in the bloodline, diseases, whether physical in their health or like womb emotional trauma that, you know, women of color and Black women tend to, we see more of it in our communities.
Got it. All right. Good. Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to like really
Mhm.
deepen that understanding. Because one is I agree with you. All of those things feel true for me. And also, I just feel like I want to say that there is such a I don't know that I trust the statistics because I don't trust the organizations that gather the statistics. And I don't think that any of it is real. I believe that it's happening. Don't get me wrong. Like, I wouldn't ever deny that this is happening. Um, but no matter what, so it's important to, and everybody has their own work to do. Like, you focusing on this is important. It needs to be brought to the forefront so that women take more control back of their own sense of awareness and the way they walk in the world instead of us consistently giving our power away to external authorities to nurture life and our birth processes and hold these lineages. So I know we're going to go into lineage and ancestry. So this actually is a really powerful segue. So I just want to say, regardless, yes, the racism is astounding. The structures, like everything needs to be re-infrastructured from within us. So the power comes from us taking back birth. The power comes from us looking within, healing our lineages, doing the work that we have to do internally to create the new infrastructure. The guy outside is not going to do it. And a lady, whether she's in it, whether she's black, whether she's white or she's purple, we cannot look externally for any figure to be a symbol for us. We have to be it. So it's so powerful what is happening across the globe with women and yeah, free birthing at home and just like it is happening. As strong as the complex keeps growing with IVF and all of these artificial means of carrying and bringing life into creation, it's like the herbalists, the midwives, the doulas, everybody's strengthening at the same time. So it's all rising together. So when we talk about IVF, for example, I just want to like lean into this now. So we see that this uprising is very strong. And so many women my age, your age, are are feeling so afraid, so insecure, and so longing for life that so many people are going in that direction. Let's get into IVF.
Yeah, so IVF, like I call it, it's the next conveyor belt after birth control.
Hmm.
It's a way to keep us suppressed, uninformed about our capacity to heal, and it's a completely spiritually void process. So I know I just said a lot, but going back to what I said, it's the next conveyor belt. So most sexually active women are going on birth control
Yeah.
as soon as they even become sexually active. And even before then, a lot of these doctors are convincing even our mothers when we're prepubescent to
That
put
it's
us on
good for us. Yeah.
that is good for us to put us on birth control if when we first get our period, we experience painful periods to just put us on birth controls and that'll make our acne go away
Yeah.
and that'll make our pain go away. So that's the first conveyor belt that we experience as really our initiation into just becoming a woman.
Hmm.
So if you've been following the studies on gut health, birth control is like antibiotics. It wreaks havoc on the gut.
Hmm.
Women, first of all, it takes you 2 to 3 years when you first get your period for your hormones to even just
Regulate.
regulate and know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
But right away, we're on birth control. Then if you are sexually active, then like for my mom, God forbid I came to her home with a child, right? So it was like, absolutely, you're having sex, then get on birth control.
Yeah.
And you're not even having a real period when you're on birth control,
You are not. You are
right?
not.
You're bleeding, but it's not a true bleed.
Hmm.
So your hormones are already being hijacked synthetically by you taking either, a progesterone-based birth control like Depo-Provera, or you being on the pill or the NuvaRing, whatever you have it. And over the years, I know you've seen it where it's like, take the pill every day to like, wouldn't it be nice if you don't have your period at all for
Ever? I
5 years? 5 years, you know what I mean? It went from that, like, just kill the whole damn thing.
Isn't it crazy?
Wild. And as a 20-year-old girl, I was like, fuck yeah. I
Yeah,
don't, why not?
I
Like, just
know.
play with this because we
It's
don't understand.
it's
No
so
one's teaching us that you need your hormones, right? Most women are taking like estrogen based, um, or even progesterone, because I was on Depo-Provera. That was my first thing. You know, no one's telling you that you need good hormonal balance for your bone health, that can lead to osteoporosis. And, no one's talking about this when you're 20 years old.
no, they're
So you
not
just
talking
say,
about
yes,
it.
let's just be done with it. So after you're on the conveyor belt for birth control, then you're now, you and I, we didn't hear this conversation, but now it's like you're approaching your late 20s. Oh my God, you don't want to be 30 and reach, you know, um, advanced maternal age, do you? So before, you be a good girl and you focus on your career and you focus on your education. And we all know dating sucks out here. So in the meantime, your eggs are gonna dwindle and be down to like nothing. So you better go harvest your eggs
Eggs. Ugh.
and freeze them and give yourself the chance while you're still working on being this masculine version of yourself and achieve and achieve and achieve.
Yeah.
At least go freeze your eggs, sis, like so that your eggs can be like good to go when you do find that Prince Charming.
And they
right? So it's
don't tell you that when your eggs are frozen, think about the meat you put in the freezer after a year, after 6 months, after a year, after 2 years. What's the quality of the life of those eggs? What's the
yeah.
quality of the meat in your freezer? I mean, it's
Mhm.
crazy what we've signed on, what the world is signing on for.
Yeah, and again, we just get convinced, like we see the ads,
Yeah.
and we're like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great like hack. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's a great biohack. Let me go freeze my eggs. Like, sure, why not? Not like if they were to tell you, like, do you want to rent you want to pay rent for you want to have storage for your eggs for the rest of, for the next 20 years, So then we start into this conversation. So if you're in your late 20s and you're being groomed, because that's what we are by the medical industrial complex,
Yes.
groomed to go freeze our eggs, do they explain to us that because your eggs are now in a petri dish in somebody's freezer, that in order to have that baby, you have to go through IVF already? You took a whole spiritual enlightenment, sexual, primal love
Process.
process out of the whole thing. You just froze your eggs and you went right to IVF.
Yeah. I
So,
just have to breathe for a minute because I feel so much grief.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah.
mhm.
There's a reason to grieve this, y'all. I know that this is a celebration for some, but we're going to get into that piece of it in a minute. But when you really look at the context of what we are giving away and what we've allowed so much to be distorted and the harm that is being caused and just the evacuation of dignity and life and full experience and expression, it is a big deal.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about IVF if you absolutely need it. And
Mm.
I'm talking about at 20 years old, you're being groomed towards the IVF, towards an IVF
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
So at no point is anyone talking to us about the power of our blood,
Hmm.
how, the Hopi saying that if we bleed onto the earth, all war
Yeah.
is done, how we are in sync with the moon.
Hmm.
No one's talking to us about how it's a report card for our our health
Yeah.
every month. No one's talking about how we're purging the emotions of a month's time. No one's talking to us about how sacred it is to conceive a child with someone you love.
Hmm.
So much of this, like what I call conscious conception, is not part of the conversation as we fearmonger women in their 20s to freeze their eggs.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And the way we fearmonger, even those women, it's a post conversation because we're talking about how they're groomed first. But even so many women I know that go for IVF. And please, I just want to say there are so many sisters that I love who have had IVF and have healthy children, and I let that continue to be the case and bless you. So this is not to diminish your experience, but it is just to bring greater clarity and shine light on the fact that this is an industry. And if you had it your way, would you want that for your own daughter? Everybody wants to do it naturally. It's what we were born to do.
Yeah.
And if something happens and we choose an alternative route, that's a choice. But
Mhm.
there is something that needs to be deepened in our understanding around the vitality and the capacity for us to be thriving, fecundant women and making that our life's work, to
Yeah.
live in that stream, to devote ourselves to that and make that the new science. Like it's the real deal. So that way, by the time we're 40, and how many women, I'm sure you see this too. I have like a slew of women in their 40s that are pregnant and having children. Like this
Yeah.
geriatric bullshit. Like I'm a big fan of do it younger just
Yeah.
because why not? You are healthier. We live in an environment, if you're, I'll speak for the United States, our water supply, our food has been compromised. There's a lot going on. So don't put off. If you have a partner who you love, get in there, like handle your business, make beautiful babies. The bullshit of the independent woman and waiting until, you're 40 or 50 years old so that you are already scheduled to have IVF is not necessary. Like you can have babies whenever you feel like it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
so let's go there. So if you happen to, you know, not fall victim to freezing your eggs,
Hmm.
then you continue on this path of, educating yourself and achieving in your career and not settling for the same subpar relationships that maybe the women in our family have, and you wait to find someone that you feel um can nurture you and love into you in a way that maybe, your mother wasn't.
Yeah.
So at this point, you might be in your mid 30s, and that's when we start to talk about you being in an age of advanced maternal age. And that's the next like conversation that gets penetrated into our psyche. And the truth is that women aren't, just like we're not taught the body literacy of our menstrual cycle, we're not taught the body literacy of what a fertile body is or
Hmm.
what are fertile indicators. So there's some women who, when they reach the age that they do want to consciously conceive, right? Because at this point, if you haven't got pregnant, like, whoops,
Hmm.
right? Then it's going to take some work to kind of figure out as you mature, like, so why haven't I gotten pregnant? And we're lacking the education that teaches us what our fertile
When?
signs are.
Exactly. Exactly.
How do I get pregnant?
This is like, for me, the most important work of our times.
Mhm.
Like from young girls coming onto their menses, the rite of passage of being embraced into their blood and learning body literacy from jump. If we
From
can
jump.
learn, if we can learn, if these little cutie pies can learn computer programs and how to master the interweb, surely, like
Yeah.
I don't want to hear anyone's bullshit anymore about like it's too advanced for them. No, it's their bodies. What
Mhm.
I would have done with that information, like I was pregnant at 16
Okay. Yep.
and there was pregnancies before that. So if
Mhm.
if my generation, if we had known, if we had access, and PS, that there's no blame on that. That's the way it was in the times we're in. And now we're in different times. And that's why you and me and so many women were like the mother's web on the rise. It's like here, know this, know this. It's like it- it's
Yeah.
it's
Or
determining your health for the rest of your life.
absolutely. Like I mentioned, if you track your menstrual cycle and you track your fertility indicators, then you know so much about your health. You know so much about your hormones. You know so much that you can consciously avoid pregnancy or
Yes.
consciously conceive. And instead of learning things like this in high school, whereas where women should, young adults should be learning this, I
Yeah.
learned how to put a condom on a banana. Like that's what I
Yeah.
learned
Yeah.
in my sexual education class. How
Same.
when a man says, my penis is too big, let me show you how I can put this condom on my head, and he's lying. So, that's what I learned.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but there's so much more to learn. And so women don't start to learn this consciously until they are experiencing difficulties conceiving in their
Yes.
30s. So they go to their doctor, right? And they're 35 or so. That's the women I specialize in. And they're like, I haven't been able to get pregnant. I don't know why. Then goes the next thing that women are bombarded with, other than like, okay, so I have a sense of urgency now because now I'm old.
Yeah.
Now my biological clock is ticking, which is bullshit because like you said, you have friends in their
Yeah.
40s. I've been at home births for women in their late 40s. I know it's possible, but that's not what we are seeing in the media,
Mainstream.
right?
Mhm.
The mainstream media. What we're seeing is like, I'm old. I have to do this quickly now.
Yeah.
And So we start to see ads for like the ovulation predictor kits and peeing on a stick to see whether your LH, your luteinizing hormone is rising. And it's like, what? They don't even know that doesn't even tell you whether you're ovulating. A spike in your LH doesn't tell you whether or not you are ovulating. It just says that you are more likely to ovulate during that time, but that doesn't confirm an ovulation.
Hmm.
So they don't know when that is, and they go to the doctors. And OBs, that's not what they're there to do. So they
Yeah.
defer them to fertility doctors. And we also aren't in awareness that fertility doctors are code for IVF doctors. So
Absolutely.
none of these doctors are looking to see, well, how can I help you conceive naturally? They're looking for like, you're a number here. And so I don't have time, or they don't even know how to, practice fertility awareness method, like what you and I are
Yeah.
discussing. So they're saying, well, let us make you ovulate. We'll make this easy for you.
Yeah.
We'll just let us know when you have your period somewhere along the middle, which the most women don't have a 28-day cycle, but
Mhm.
okay, somewhere then along the middle, you're gonna come and we're gonna force your ovulation, and then we're going to inject your husband's sperm into you and hope that you get pregnant. But again, that's what if we were to learn fertility awareness method and body literacy so that we can know for sure it's the only way that we are able to know ourselves whether or not we're ovulating,
Yeah.
so and the hormones that go into taking that
Oh,
you're required to take to be able to force your body to ovulate and then stay pregnant against its will.
yes.
And at what point does anyone say, well, why am I having a hard time getting pregnant to begin with? Because a lot of times it isn't that we're not ovulating. A lot of times it's just there's health conditions in the way, right? Like there's root causes that haven't been addressed that are making us have these difficulties to begin with, that no one's taken the time to help us uncover and address holistically and proactively.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, it's these same health conditions that plague us in pregnancy, that plague us in our baby's health, that plague us in maternal mortality, that plague us in postpartum and perimenopause. They keep chasing us until finally someone addresses the root causes. But
Mm-hmm.
in the meantime, because they're not, somebody's making money off of you.
Yep. And all of this too. So the physical roots that we're talking about with the physical health, and then there is the spiritual preparedness
Yeah.
and the soul
Yeah.
willingness to bring a baby in and the ancestral lineages. Like there's so many pieces into bringing life onto the planet. Like these vessels, I mean, I just cannot specify the depth enough how we underestimate, we misunderstand how fucking powerful it is for a woman to bring a soul from the stars into her body and allow it to gestate and grow inside of her and bring it earthside.
Mhm. I
So that
actually
process, go ahead, what?
in my work of doing helping women with infertility in their late 30s and onto their 40s, I've found that there's an intersection of actually both of these things,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's the spiritual concept that you're bringing up, like the soul work, doing the spirit baby work and the ancestral work, but
Yeah.
there's also the physical piece, and there's this sweet spot in between
Mm-hmm.
that is, if you are having challenges conceiving, you should see this as an opportunity to heal
Word.
yourself, as
Yes.
a link between the past ancestors and your future ancestors, because I believe that our children are our ancestors being reborn through us. So it's about looking at that intersection of I'm not infertile, because real infertility is very, very rare. Most women do not have true infertility. what we're talking about it
I
is
agree.
subfertility. It's
Hmm.
subfertility. And it's not like a curse, and it's not that something's wrong with you. What it really is an opportunity from your ancestors to break the cycle of something wrong with your health that needs attention.
Hmm.
And you're being asked to do that work by the child and the children that want to come to you so that they don't have to inherit that. The
Yes.
children that want to be born through women that are meant to come into the consciousness, like you and I did later in our lives,
Yeah.
that's like our initiation,
Hmm.
right? So it's like it's about answering the call to heal yourself for the sake of your children,
Yeah.
the sake of that elevation in the bloodline that wants to happen. Like I see it as like you're the chosen one from your ancestors to do that work, to do the shadow work, to do the healing, so that not only you can benefit by having this child that you so desire, but they can come to you in a place of better health than they would have had you bypassed all of these things through IVF.
Agreed. Agreed. It's really, really powerful. And I'm what I want to see more of is these seeds. Right now, it's been like when women have unhealthy wombs, fibroids, endometriosis, whatever the crisis is that brings you into having to do the work. What if we were at a place where you didn't have to go into crisis to do the work, right? So, what we're talking about is preparing and opening the spaces for younger generations of women to experience this differently. And so I'd like to see, like through me, through you, through all these women who are having to go through the chaos, right? To go into the wound in order to get the healing balm, that we then embody that antidote, that medicine. And then because of that wisdom, it's innate for us to want to share that, to pass that. Like here, I mean, we should be teaching this to the motherfucking Girl Scouts. Like it should be everywhere, right? Like this is normal health conversations. Like the times are changing. Like we need to be really, really imbuing our youth with it so that way they can foster and develop this relationship with ancestors, this relationship as a spiritual beings, so that these are like all conscious, benevolent, divine beings. So when they go into fertility, it's like ready. So it's like the both end, right? So we're coming up now. It's like a massive crisis. I mean, so many women's wombs are sick and unhealthy, and it's just a call to deepen, strengthen, and come home. And all things, all waters open. Like there's so much possibility in using that time to bring the consciousness through and to heal ourselves and to change everything. It's really in our hands.
It is in our hands, and that's very difficult to see though when you're being told that you need to freeze your eggs, or you're being told
Yes.
that you're infertile, or you're being told that IVF is your only option.
Yeah.
Um, it's a place of that a lot of women
Desperation.
feel desperation, and a lot of women feel isolation.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we remember that part of us part of a solution that works, in my experience, works is one that, like I mentioned, has the ancestral piece and the spiritual piece, but also has a piece that helps us address our root causes
Hmm.
to all the womb ailments that you've mentioned. And it should be a solution that also has that community piece of women have traditionally never had to heal on their own.
Mm.
So if you're faced with infertility, consider a solution that has an intersection of all of those.
I love that. Hmm. Yeah. And to also remember that there's so much available. It's just that normally we're not aware of it, right? There's yoni steaming. There's so many different ways in which we can naturally heal through food, through steaming, through care, through consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
And you know, and I want to speak to women who, in particular, right now,
Mhm.
who have done those things, who I meet with day in and day out, and they're like, you know, I've done the steaming, I've done the womb herbs, I've done the talk therapy, I've sat with my trauma.
Mhm.
Um, I just still don't know why I haven't had a chance to conceiving. What I've found to help those women are what I call the ancestral womb gut connection.
Mm.
So we inherit our microbiome from our mothers who inherit it from our grandmothers. Same, we were in our mom's womb when our moms were in their grandmother's womb. So if we inherit things like our microbiome, and epigenetics tell us that we also inherit stress and trauma,
Mhm.
then, and we also see that, you know, when women get together, we hear the stories of like, I have fibroids, my mom had fibroids.
Yeah.
Or I have endo, my cousin has endo. Or I have cysts, my sister has cysts. You
Yeah.
know, this is also, that's what I mean by the ancestral womb gut connection. And so, what helps women who are having to face whether IVF is truly their option is gut healing is critical.
Mm.
It's critical. Because like I said, when we talk about digestion and gut healing, it goes beyond like a probiotic or kombucha.
Mm.
Um, when we talk about digestion, it's beyond food. We're digesting trauma,
Life.
we're digesting experience, we're digesting stress, we're digesting life. And that's the womb gut connection.
Beautiful. So in your programs and your work with women, that's one of the central focuses.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And now do you do that mostly with with food, like
Yeah, we do it in an interdisciplinary way.
Mhm.
So part of our work we do somatically with trauma and stress and emotions. And then we definitely get down and dirty with gut protocols that are specifically for fertility.
Mhm.
And then the last piece, reproduce, is all about that body literacy that you and I were discussing. Like after you've cleared the gut and cleared the womb and you've done your cleanses and your protocols, then you are ready and primed to do the work with that's of the spirit and the soul contracts and your ancestors. And you can step into that wise women body literacy of, am I ovulating? Is my progesterone level enough to sustain a pregnancy? There's no guessing as to when you should conceive. There's no going to the IVF doctors to do that for you. So those three ways are the ways that I help women with infertility. And I simplify them as saying like rest, reset, and reproduce.
Beautiful.
That's our three-step process.
I love that. Yeah, it's really, really beautiful. I
It's
want
really
to
not.
honor and acknowledge that this journey is really intense for women, and not everybody has access to the same information, right? Just like some people only have access to mainstream media, and that's where consciousness is leading them, right? And then there are others that like find their way through. And so it's really intense. And so these conversations are so important because there are other pathways. And there is a unique pathway for every woman because every woman's body is different. Even though we all like generally do the same thing, the experience is really different. You see so many people too. I don't know if you would notice this in your practice, but so many women go towards IVF and they become pregnant naturally. Like there's something that happens.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
it's like the divine comes in is like, no, like just, we got this. Like,
Yeah, I've seen that as well.
yeah, it's intense times. It's important though to just really be aware that science is going to keep emerging with more and more trinkets and technologies. And so, like the overall how to become so deeply in the sacredness of your own body and your own sovereignty, and to have the support of the community and those that know to be with you through the process. Because I mean, like, I didn't stand a chance back in the day. I mean, I was mouthy, and I was a teenager when I was pregnant, so I was already riled up and said no a lot to some of what the Western complex was throwing at me. But so many of us don't. Like, it's just we've been conditioned in such a way that we've lost that sense of real animal intelligence, and that tells us, like, no, this is not for me, no, this is not the truth. So it's like coming back and deepening into the intuition, into that like deep life force.
Yeah,
So it's big work.
it is big work and it is overwhelming. What I've found is that it is unfair
Yeah.
to ask women to, in their late 30s and in their 40s, have to now come into an immediate awakening and state of wisdom.
Yeah.
It is unfair because, as I mentioned, we've been on a conveyor belt for as long as we've been menstruating.
Mhm.
Somebody's been making money off of our reproductive system. Somebody's been making money out of keeping us drugged and dumb to our wisdom.
Yeah.
And we've also been socialized on what does it mean to be a good girl?
Mhm.
And the good girl goes to the doctor,
Yeah.
who's a white man,
Mhm.
usually. It's
Yeah.
never like, let me find you a midwife. No, no one's saying that. It's like go to the OP, and
Yeah.
it's okay that it's a man and he doesn't have your same, things, but just go to the white man
Yeah.
and he knows better than you about you from a very young age,
Yeah.
right? So go to school, say yes, take your meds. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. They can help us. They can help us. And then all of a sudden, you are in a position of need and vulnerability, and you're supposed to be like, I'm powerful. I can do this. Body autonomy. No, that's
Yeah.
not how this works,
It's
babe.
not. It takes
That's not how that
time.
works. And that's how I start. That's why I started my story like I did. I came into this wisdom and knowledge out of sheer trauma and distress. I was
Mhm.
fucked up. I
Yeah.
had to be dragged into this wisdom. And because I was dragged into this wisdom, I lived to tell about it and teach women about alternatives because I was determined to learn the alternatives only after I suffered the consequences of not knowing. So if you're hearing this, I'm raising the flag to say you don't need to go through the same things I did, sis. Let me teach you some things I learned along the way.
Mm. I love that. Yes.
Because your only option is not IVF. And
Hmm.
they're not going to tell you that. They're not going to tell you that you need 6 rounds of IVF to even get to a 55% success rate. They're not going to tell you that IVF is like, $10,000 a round, and that does not even include medications. They're not going to tell you that because they forced your body into it. That doesn't mean you can stay pregnant because
Hmm.
they avoided the issues that were there to begin with, your root
Yeah.
causes. They avoided them. So what makes you think you can stay pregnant now? And even if you stay pregnant, you burden your body with pregnancy, that's a big load.
Hmm.
And now you expect to be just happy and not in postpartum when your body's falling apart, you
So
know? So
intense. Do
it's
you know
very,
much about the rates as far as, I mean, I know it's still, again, we'll never really know, again, the statistics of things, but
mhm.
the children of IVF,
Yes.
there's, I mean, that's
You
another
want to get you
story.
want to get into all the things I see.
There's so much. It's like a huge trail.
It's a huge trail, but yes, the children of women that conceive IBS have a higher rate of autism.
Mhm.
That's been proven.
Yeah. And I will just say, and let this not be the case. Let this change. But we have to acknowledge that there's going to be other things too, but they're not coming out and because they're not testing for them because they want to keep IVF as a very viable main source. So the production of drugs, the production of scientific research, everything is geared towards how does it benefit? Like just we're seeing HRT now. Oh, it's really good for women. Like women need it so they don't go into dementia. I mean, come on, please with this. So they're not spending money studying all the things that are bad for it, for you. So you have to lean in and acknowledge like, oh,
The studies are there. The studies are there. But who's really going to share that with you if not me, who has the alternative? You're
yeah.
not going to hear from an IVF doctor that you need 6 rounds to, like I said, get 50% effective. Or if we do this, your child may have, you know, consequences. We don't hear those things.
Yeah. And we still don't know the consequences of what we do to a certain degree. As we said, removing the spiritual aspect of the actual conception. So having a middle person involved. And also there's this whole thing, I watched this whole thing about the Petri plates and how they're using the sperm and choosing it. So there's a natural process where the sperm and where the womb is not the one who's actually choosing and pulling in, what it needs. It's there's somebody else involved. There's a guy who's playing God.
A guy who's playing God who's saying, oh, this sperm's motility is good, this
Yeah.
sperm's mobility is good. Um, and I'm gonna choose this one instead of, like you said, naturally our wombs are the ones that pull the sperm that it desires and feels like it's the strongest,
Oh,
and or maybe even metaphysically meant to impregnate
yes.
the women, and be the heir of the bloodline.
Mhm.
Um, that's all being taken away.
Yeah. Yep.
And I saw an ad recently. It was like, you want to do IVF, even if you can get pregnant naturally, because we can help you choose the DNA that's, strongest, and we can help determine the gender of your child, and we can help you determine which of those sperms don't have genetically predisposed, illnesses and all, like you said, playing
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Playing God.
There's a lot of wisdom from, even if your womb chooses, let's say, a sperm that can lead to DNA fragmentation that's not optimal.
Mhm.
There's a wisdom between
Yes.
cells that says, actually not. This pregnancy will end up in a miscarriage.
Yeah.
And while a lot of women are like, I want to avoid a miscarriage at any means necessary, there's a lot of wisdom that comes in sitting in the grief
Yes.
of a miscarriage. And
Hmm.
it's usually a grief that's intergenerational, that wants an opportunity to purge and process itself, that if had it not been for that miscarriage, you wouldn't have access to. But a lot
Yes.
of women don't want to talk about that.
Nobody
Like
wants to
you
talk
and
about
I can go on for days. I know
it
it.
now. It's really, really big. So, all right, to just round this out.
To just round this out.
To round this out,
Just round this out. I think I have a lead. To round this out, reproductive issues, like what we've discussed here, or like our menstrual challenges with our menstrual cycle, or challenges in conceiving, they're an opportunity for us to do some deep, heavy lifting and healing on the path for liberation, which is
yes.
what we're all here to do.
Yes.
So if you're suffering from infertility, will you answer the call from your ancestors to do that work? You're
Yes.
not damaged. You're not cursed. You're actually the chosen one. So elevate, turn up.
That's beautiful.
Let's do the work together.
Yeah, that's well-rounded. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right, listeners. I think this is the perfect closing. I will place Sangeet's information below for those that want the support
Yep.
to
I'm at
create
I'm
fecundant lives.
yep,
You're at
I'm
where?
at Royal Mothering on Instagram is probably the easiest way to connect with me. And the
Oh,
name of my fertility program is the Pregnancy Formula.
beautiful. Thank you. Thank you
For
so
having
much
me.
for being with us. This was great. I know we could talk for hours because there's so many
Mhm.
pieces. I'm like, la 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 la. But thank you again, and we will see you all soon. Take care.